afternoon to everyone present in this hall, to the head junior wing, Mr. Poonam Nama, my respected teachers, parents, and my dear friends. As you all know, we have been gathered here today to witness the junior wing inter-house English elocution competition. Before we begin with this elocution, I would like to call upon the judges. The first judge is Mr. Virendra Rai, housemaster of Hastings House and head of department of biology. The second judge is Mr. Sudhir Khale, the head of department of science and senior physics teacher. And the third judge is Mr. Sanjeev Rai, teacher of sociology and English. The tabulator for this round is Mr. Umang Khawas. And the prompter is Shreyansh Ayush Singh.
The Last Watch by W. Jacobs. Captain Barnaby sat at the bar in the Fisherman's Rest, a seedy pub by the docks, nursing a pint of ale. It was his usual hunt after a long voyage, and he was quite a storyteller when he'd had a few drinks. Tonight, a group of younger sailors gathered around, eager to hear another one of his famous tales. "Captain," said one of the sailors, a young man,
Day's Wait by Ernest Hemingway. He came into the room to shut the windows while we were still in bed, and I saw that he looked ill. He was shivering, his face was white, and he walked slowly as though it ached to move. "What's the matter, Scats?" "I've got a headache." "You better go to bed." "I'm all right." "You go to bed. I will see you when I am dressed." But when I came downstairs, he was dressed, sitting by the fire, looking very sick and miserable.
Jerome K. Jerome's 3 men in a boat. We decided what we need to take. Harris always reminds me of my Uncle Podger. When my Uncle Podger agreed to do anything, there was always a great disturbance. A picture had come from frame maker and was in the dining room waiting to be put up. Then Aunt Podger asked what was to be done with it. Then Uncle Podger said, "Oh, you leave that to me. Don't worry about that." Then he took off his coat and began. He sent the girl out for some nails. After that, one of the boys to tell her what size to get. After that, he gradually had the whole house doing things.
Teenage Tragedy, author unknown. Even a fool knows that the period of life between the age of 13 to 19 is filled with tragedies. Now, when I tell you of the greatest tragedy experienced by my father, you may be tempted to smile politely behind your hands. But I can assure you that to my father, at 16, it was the end of the world. I shall narrate this incident in my father's very own words. In the boarding school where I had spent the happiest years of my life, to have a girl friend was considered the height of adventure. I too had been slain by Cupid's darts and had sent innumerable letters to a girl named Joyce. At this stage, apart from girls, I also loved food. I hide my head when I think of the letters that I sent Joyce. Her hair, I said, reminded me of butter, her cheeks of cream, and her eyes were limpid pools of drinking chocolate. The final step was to meet the beloved at some scheduled spot. Accordingly, I wrote, "Dearest, I am pining for a sight of your face. I am sighing like a furnace. Such is my case. Please, do meet me in the little garden. That's the place where you and I shall defy the fates." I was rather proud of my English and thought myself only second to Shakespeare himself. Joyce sent back a terse message. I can't, she wailed emphatically. However, after several requests, she agreed to meet me as a visitor's parlor. My friend was keeping guard over us. Her eyes were framed in thick ringlets of ivory ovals, and she was stunningly beautiful. We both stared at each other for a full minute. Dawn struck. I did build up some courage and finally gave rise to my eloquence. Hello, I said. Hello, she answered. I tried a line from The Merchant of Venice. How sweet the moonlight sleeps upon his bank. My confounded voice squeaked, so I cleared my throat and started again. How sweet the moonlight sleeps upon his bank. It was a tender moment. She held out her hand, and I grasped it. But then the girl's friend in the corner had to spoil the moment entirely. But tonight there isn't any moonlight. There was a low warning whistle from Bob. Goodbye, I said abruptly. I must go. Wait, she commanded. You may kiss my hand before you leave. Should you be here, Clarence? It was the cold voice of Brother Peter, our headmaster. As he loomed up behind me like a cat on a mouse, I had visions of the king that was never too far from him. Should you be here? Yes, brother. I mean, no, brother. Stop this awful spluttering at once and go wait in my office. I turned and walked towards his office. Proudly, I held up my head. Now that was my undoing. I tripped on a flower pot and fell flat on my face. And she laughed, mind you. With a bitter taste in my mouth, I scrambled up and made an undignified exit, with wild thoughts of suicide rushing throughout my splattered mind. Thank you.